Well, this isn't embarrassing. Donald Trump met with the president of Liberia today and decided to give him a compliment.
Well, thank you. It's such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. It's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well.
Very good, sir.
The language of Liberia is English. They speak English in Liberia. Maybe that's why he's so good at speaking English. Certainly talks better than Donald Trump does. All the people are like, Donald Trump's not a racist. When has he ever been racist? Here's one. Here's an example. And if you were like, no, you're one of those people who thinks that racism and all of those things like misogyny and bigotry and homophobia are like on-off switches. It's black or it's white, and there's no room in the middle, and that's not how any of that works. It's a spectrum. Best example that I've heard is, it's like a gas tank. You got to work to keep the tank on empty. But even if you had an empty gas tank, it was like, hey, you got any gas in your tank? And you're like, no. And I said, you want to light a match and drop it in there? You'd be like, no, there's still fumes. Fumes either way, right? Got to work on it. But saying that was pretty openly fucking gross. So, par for the course for this turd.
Because Liberia is a nation of slave ancestry that they sent from America back to Africa, created Liberia, and the Liberians took the entire fucking country. Their flag looks like the American fucking flag, and our sitting U.S. president didn't know the official language is fucking English because their ancestors are fucking slaves. I'm so sick and tired of this dumbass shit that I had to fucking scream just now, because I don't think you got.
Donald Trump is an idiot, and we are living through one of the most embarrassing times in American history for leadership. In a meeting with the president of Liberia, Joseph Boakai, President Trump asked him, "How did you learn English? Where were you educated?" As if Africans do not have education. English is the official language of Liberia. English is the official language of 67 countries. I'm not aware if Trump knows this, but people in Africa speak English because there's multiple countries in Africa and around the world that speak English. I'm sure he thought English was just an Australian, British, and American thing, but it's spoken in a lot of places due to colonialism. But he said, where did you learn it? When he said, I went to school in Liberia, Trump said, oh, interesting. You know what else is interesting? How you're a fucking idiot and you failed out of school while the president of Liberia has multiple degrees. So not only is he more educated than you in scary Africa, which a lot of people are more educated than you there, he speaks multiple languages because of what? Colonialism. He has to speak his tribal language and the national language of the country because colonialism. America. Here we are.
So imagine this. You are the president of Libya, Joseph Boakai, sitting across from the president of the United States, arguably the most powerful man on the planet. You have a lifetime of public service behind you. You hold multiple academic degrees. You've served your country with dignity and wisdom. And then, with all eyes watching you, you get asked a question that stops you in your tracks. How did you learn English? Where were you educated? Now, pause for a moment. Really sit with that. Because what just happened isn't just a diplomatic misstep or an awkward moment in transition. It's a loud, echoing revelation of something far more dangerous. The global consequences of ignorance and how deeply it can wound. Let me say it clearly. English is Liberia's official language. It has been since the country was founded, not adopted, not borrowed, not recently introduced. Liberia was established by freed African Americans in the early 1800s. Its capital city is named Monrovia after US President James Monroe. The entire country was literally formed by people who spoke English as their first language, brought by their American colonization society. So yes, the president of Libya speaks English fluently, beautifully, and with more sophisticated than many who are born and raised in the United States. But somehow that wasn't just unexpected. It was shocking to a sitting US president. And the truth is, it's not just about Trump. It reveals how normalized it has become for Western leaders, and particularly American ones, to be woefully under uninformed about the world, especially when it comes to, African nations. Ask yourself, what does it say when the leader of the free world doesn't even know the official language of one of America's oldest allies? What does it say when that ignorance is directed toward a black African president, as if eloquence or educated are exceptions in scary Africa? This isn't just a foot in the mouth moment. This is part of a pattern of racism, a pattern of historical amnesia, a pattern of belittling others based on shallow and uninformed stereotypes. This question was more than ignorant, it was dehumanizing. Now, let's talk history for a moment. Liberia was born out of one of the most complicated chapters in American history. In the early 1800s, while slavery was still legal in the United States, a group called the American Colonization Society came into existence. Their goal to send freed African Americans back to Africa. Now, don't get it twisted. This wasn't some pure humanitarian mission. The group was made up for both Quakers who believed African Americans would face less racism in Africa, and slaveholders who simply wanted freed black people out of the US because they feared rebellion. By 1822, a colony had formed on the West African coast, and by the time the American Civil War rolled around, over 15,000 freed African Americans had resettled there. In 1847, Liberia declared independence, and although the US didn't immediately recognize it, Liberia became the first modern African republic. But here's what matters. Those African Americans brought with them their language, their values, their faith, and their dreams. English wasn't a foreign language. It was the very foundation upon which Liberia was built. So when Trump or anyone else expresses shock that a Liberian president speaks fluent English, they are not only showing ignorance of a language, they are erasing centuries of shared history. This isn't just about language. It's about a world that often forgets that Africa is not some monolithic backward continent in need of saving. It's about a West that continues to act surprised when African intellect, diplomacy, and excellence show up in full force. And perhaps the most painful part in this, the question about English reflects a deep belief, whether conscious or not, that Africans do not or should not possess the same intellectual prowess as their Western counterparts. That assumption is racism in action. Now, let's talk about the wider implications of this moment, because honestly, this is bigger than Liberia. It's bigger than President Boakai. It's even bigger than Donald Trump. This moment is a microcosm of a global power imbalance reinforced by ignorance, racism, and a failure to appreciate the complexity of international history. When a US president is surprised that an African head of state speaks English, what does that tell us about how much respect is actually given to the, global South? When the assumptions like this go unchallenged, they become embedded in how policies are formed, how aid is distributed, how allies are treated, and how lives are valued. We live in a world where countries like Liberia, countries with deep American ties, are still treated as foreign curiosities, not equals, where Western media barely cover African affairs unless there is a crisis, where African excellence still has to shock people into paying attention. Now, let's ask a hard question. Would this kind of question ever be asked to an Irish president or a German chancellor? Of course not, because their whiteness is assumed to come with legitimacy, intellect, and linguistic ability. But when the skin is black, suddenly the bar gets moved and moved and moved. Let me say this clearly. That's not just ignorance. That's not just a cultural gap. That's white supremacy in action. And it's not just about embarrassment for America. It's about global credibility. Because if US leadership continues to misunderstand, stereotype, or outright dismiss the leaders of entire continents, how can America claim any moral high ground? What we witnessed was not just a diplomatic blunder, it was a moment that exposed the dangerous consequences of willful ignorance, the kind that defines entire regions by outdated stereotypes and limits corporations based on race and nationality. Liberia is not an afterthought. It is not a side story. It is a founding member of the United Nations, a leader in regional diplomacy, and a country with rich, complex history. President Boakai doesn't need a translator. He doesn't need validation, and he sure as hell doesn't need to explain why he speaks English. He represents a nation that was born out of the most painful ironies of American history, a country formed by people who were once enslaved in the US, now leading their own republic with dignity, resilience, and yes, fluent English. We have to do better. Our political leaders must be held to a higher standard. Basic knowledge of global allies shouldn't be a bonus. It should be the minimum respect. Respect for foreign dignitaries should be non-negotiable, and understanding colonial histories must be prerequisites for any holding office in a global superpower. Because at the end of the day, questions like where did you learn English are not harmless. They are humiliating, they are revealing, and they are dangerous. They perpetuate a worldview that sees Africa as less than, and that perception has consequences: economic consequences, political consequences, human consequences. To anyone watching this, let this be a wake-up call. Whether you are in politics, journalism, education, or simply a curious human being, know the world you live in. Know the countries that have stood with you. Know their history, their languages, their leaders. Because when you know better, you speak better. When you speak better, you lead better. And when you lead better, the world actually changes. Let's stop being, surprised by African excellence. Let's start being prepared for it. Guys, drop a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are about this. Also, remember to subscribe, like, and share as well. And until next time, bye-bye.